In a strangely weird but completely fitting way, it now feels like the NBA Finals are exactly where they're supposed to be, tied at 2 games apiece. Games 2 and 3 were won decisively, but just like we witnessed back in Game 1, where Oklahoma City let a late lead slip away, they returned the favor in Game 4. Down double digits in the fourth, Oklahoma City stormed back with a clutch explosion from Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and one of the most locked-in, high-level defensive sequences you're ever going to see. To put it frank, this wasn't just a comeback, it was a statement. Game 4 was all about the grit, poise, and championship-level toughness we just witnessed from one of the youngest teams in the league, and now, just like that, the Thunder are right back in the driver's seat with the home court advantage for the rest of the series. But the story is far from over. If anything, it's just getting started. These last 3 games are ultimately going to come down to the smallest margins, and I believe there are 3 key battles that will ultimately decide the series. So let's first explain exactly how the Thunder were able to flip the script in Game 4, and then I'll uncover what these 3 crucial factors mean for what could be an all-time great finish to these NBA Finals. The following morning after Game 4, I found myself needing to re-watch the fourth quarter, just to wrap my head around what just happened. When I got to late in the third quarter, right around the 2-minute mark, Indiana had just built their largest lead of the entire series, up by 10 after a top-and-cutting dunk. In the moment, it genuinely did feel like the game was slipping away from the Thunder, and that looked even more apparent after their defense forced Jalen Williams into an over and back call, followed up by the Thunder failing to box out Toppin, sending him back to the free throw stripe. But instead of Indiana then burying them, Obi bricked both free throws, and Siakam followed that up with 2 missed shots on back-to-back possessions. The second one not even grazing the rim. Meanwhile, SGA still looked completely out of rhythm. He too missing back-to-back field goals. It felt like these finals were genuinely in the balance. But then Jalen Williams stepped up as he was able to steady the ship for the Thunder. He closed the third quarter strong by drawing a couple of fouls and knocking down a tough mid-range jumper, keeping Oklahoma City in striking distance. From there, the tone completely shifted. Alex Caruso was massive in this game, dropping 20 points, and his biggest bucket was a contested fall-away jumper with the shot clock winding down, a shot that is typically far outside of his arsenal, but he was able to make it in a big moment in this game. For a guy who didn't have a single 20-point game during the entire regular season, this was already his second in these finals alone. His confidence, leadership, and unlikely shot making gave the Thunder a huge lift when they needed it the most in this game. Chet Holmgren was once again the backbone for Oklahoma City. He made crucial plays on both ends, cleaning the glass with offensive rebounds, and using his length and mobility to switch on defense, alter shots, and close off driving lanes. Time and time again, he came up big. And then in the fourth, OKC's defense, the best in the league all season long, reinserted itself in a dominant fashion. They completely clamped Indiana with deflections, steals, and just constant pressure. Caruso and SGA were the main distributors, constantly jumping into passing lanes and forcing Indiana into errors. And Lu Dort, he absolutely smothered Tyrese Halliburton. Tyrese couldn't shake him, couldn't outmuscle him, and definitely could not find space without a ball screen. And even then, OKC had that scouted too. The Thunder had watched Indiana throw Nembhard all over SGA in the first half, and then responded by doing the same to their star point guard, draping Lu Dort all over him for basically the entire second half, and it worked brilliantly. By the time the fourth quarter tipped off, you could just feel the tension in the building. The home crowd had been so loud just a couple of minutes prior, and they were suddenly silenced. Disappointment was leaking through the TV, and you could audibly hear the frustration and despair. Then came the finishing blow. SGA, who had looked shaky earlier in the game, exploded in the final 5 minutes of this one. He scored at will, rose to the moment, and carried the Thunder across the finish line. And it's easy to say that SGA was just scoring at will, but that wouldn't come close to capturing what he actually achieved in the final 5 minutes. What he did wasn't just clutch, it was historic. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander just delivered one of the greatest closing stretches in NBA Finals history, pouring in 15 points in the final 5 on the road in a game that Oklahoma City simply could not afford to lose. It wasn't just that he scored, it was how he did it. He didn't just close the game, he snatched it out of Indiana's hands right in front of their stunned home crowd. And when you start putting that kind of performance into historical context, it gets even more jaw-dropping. The last 3 players to score 15 points in a fourth quarter of an NBA Finals win was LeBron James, Steph Curry, and now Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. But here's the kicker. Shai did something that neither of them have ever done in this game. Those 15 points in the final 5 minutes of Game 4 are actually the most by any player in the final 5 minutes of an NBA Finals game since 1971. That's pre-merger. That predates the modern NBA entirely. That's the kind of history that was wrote in real time. What makes this even more ridiculous is how out of it he looked for most of this game. The Pacers had clearly game planned to take him out, and it was certainly working in this one. He looked uncomfortable, he looked overwhelmed, and the moment, even for just a little while, seems like it was getting to him. He went on to finish the game with 0 assists, something that would normally suggest that he was shut down or completely inefficient. And yet, he ended with 35 points, 3 steals, a few of which that came in massive moments when the Thunder desperately needed a break, and one incredible block on a Tyrese Halliburton 3-point attempt that could have swung the balance back in Indiana's favor late in the game. But Shai simply wasn't going to let the Thunder lose it. He was everywhere down the stretch, on defense, in transition, and at the rim. Game 4 of these finals is going to stick with me for a very long time, and the first thing we're all going to go back to is SGA piling on 15 points in the final 5 minutes to keep the Thunder's season alive. And if Oklahoma City go on to win this thing, that stretch could become the defining moment of his career. Now, it's time to take a look forward. Let's preview Game 5 of these NBA Finals. Both teams have really started to settle into their rhythm, and to me, there are 3 things that will ultimately decide a champion. The first has to do with Chet Holmgren. He's been the Thunder's backbone on both ends. But Game 4 was where he really stood out. Offensively, he was relentless on the glass, pulling down 15 massive rebounds, 4 of which came off the offensive glass, as he finally started to exploit one of Indiana's biggest weaknesses, boxing out. It's an area he hadn't really leaned into in the first couple of games, being more focused in just getting back in transition as he was the lone big. But that focus flipped in Game 4 with the return of the double big lineup in the starting 5. Defensively, he wasn't just valuable. Even though he finishes with just a steal and a block, the numbers certainly don't do justice of what he actually brought the Thunder on the defensive end. His ability to switch, to contest without fouling, and to make shots at the rim incredibly difficult is all of the things that make him so valuable. OKC asked him to step up and guard more in space to avoid putting the rest of the defense into scramble mode, and he responded in a massive way. Indiana made the mistake trying to isolate him time and time again, thinking that it's a mismatch they could exploit. But all it really did was slow the game down and pull them into OKC's pace. So no, Indiana shouldn't stop looking for favorable matchups, but assuming Chet is an easy target, that simply was not true in Game 4. In fact, it played right into Oklahoma City's hands. The second swing factor is Tyrese Halliburton versus Lu Dort. That matchup has been a nightmare so far for Tyrese. Dort has smothered him. Halliburton hasn't been able to consistently get by him, and when he does, he often has to rely on ball screens, which is then making the rest of their offense pretty predictable. Predictability is absolute death against this Thunder defense. They're too good, too active, and if they know what's coming, they'll jump the passing lanes, create deflections, and tear you apart in transition. We saw that big time late in Game 4, where Indiana's offense got tight, the ball stuck, and Halliburton could not break the defense open. His scoring limitations, especially when guarded by elite physical defenders, are being exposed. Yes, his averages still look pretty good on paper, 17.8 points on 50% shooting, but dig deeper and you start to see the issues. His field goal attempts are down, his assists have plummeted to 7.5 a game, and his turnovers have skyrocketed, 4.3 a game, which is a shockingly high number for a player who normally leads the league in assist to turnover ratio. Oklahoma City is turning one of the most secure ball handlers in the league into an absolute turnover machine. That is no accident either. So if Indiana wants to win their first NBA title, Halliburton has to be far better. He's got to either find a way to get off of Dort or learn to beat him. And finally, the third key might be the least talked about, but I believe it's probably going to be the most important. It's Oklahoma City's offense versus Indiana's defense. Coming into the series, everybody talked about the Indy offense versus OKC's defense, but I believe that the inverse might actually decide the championship. Indiana's defense has been far better in these playoffs than it was during the regular season, and they're getting more and more comfortable by the game. Meanwhile, Oklahoma City has seen their offense take a dip. They had the third best offensive rating in the regular season, but in this series, they've struggled to get consistent production from anyone who's not named SGA. That's why Alex Caruso's 2 20-point nights have been so vital. He didn't even reach a 20-point game a single time in the regular season, and now he's already done it twice in the finals. It's incredible, but it's also very concerning. You cannot expect him to do that 2 more times, because if you need 20 points from Caruso to win a game in this series, Indiana is probably going to win the championship. Jalen Williams was huge in Game 4, finishing with 27 points, and his physicality gave Aaron Nesmith all kinds of problems trying to defend him. But his scoring has been super inconsistent all through these playoffs. And while his defense is top tier and his playmaking's really underrated, Oklahoma City desperately need him to be more dependable as the secondary scorer next to SGA. And to make matters worse, Chet Holmgren isn't quite there either. And then there's the overall 3-point shooting of this team, or lack thereof it. They just went 3 of 16 from deep in Game 4. That's 18% for everybody at home, and yet they still found a way to win this game. That is not sustainable. They're leaning so heavily upon their defense to keep them in games that if Indiana's defense continues to ramp up, things could get very uncomfortable for the Thunder very quickly. That being said, so much credit needs to go towards Indiana's defense. Tyrese learned a hard lesson last year in the conference finals against Boston. They constantly attacked him in switches, and it really showed him that he couldn't be a liability on that end if he wanted to continue to play winning playoff basketball. And to his credit, Halliburton's worked incredibly hard to become a more reliable defender, but Indiana also built a system around him that helps to protect him a little better. With smarter and quicker backline rotations and more intelligent help, they have really improved on that end. At the start of the season, those rotations were certainly shaky, but now they've evolved into one of the more cohesive playoff defenses we've seen. They even made SGA look uncomfortable for pretty much the majority of Game 4, until, of course, he exploded in the final 5 minutes, but they have been really good on that end. But that is the frustrating part for Indiana. They were so close to a 3-1 series lead, as they were doing basically everything they could, and yet they just could not string it together for a full 48 minutes. If Indiana can continue to make life difficult for OKC with their defense, and if Halliburton can shake loose of Dort's grip, there's absolutely still a path for a Pacers championship, even without the home court advantage. Coming into these finals, I picked the Oklahoma City Thunder to win it in 6 games. And while that prediction is certainly still alive, if I had to revise it right now, I'm probably leaning toward the Thunder in 7. But what do you guys think? How do you see the rest of these finals playing out? Let me know in the comments section below.